Fat Man Fishing. Today, let's talk fishing line. Spring is quickly rolling up on us, and it's about that time to get on the water. Temperatures are coming up. Fish are beginning to get up out of the deep water, bringing back into the shallows, beginning to get active, and beginning to start to feed. That means we can catch them a lot easier than we could over the course of the winter. Our most important rubber meets the road item when it deals with fishing is, of course, your hook. But the second most important to some people, and to some people the first, is your fishing line. Now, if you're like a lot of folks, you go in a place like Walmart and you get confused because there is oodlings of fishing line in there, different styles, different colors, different material, and a lot of people don't know exactly what they should get. And everybody's wondering, is my fishing line the right fishing line? The answer is yes. It depends, though, on what you're doing. Okay, you're going to be fishing, let's say a scenario that you're fishing in pretty clear water. Okay, I fish Dale Hollow Lake a lot. If you're fishing in pretty clear water and you're fishing up in the shallows for smallmouth bass, for crappie, or for bluegill or shellcrackers, a lot of times they're spooky. You got to keep the boat back away from them, and they don't like to see the line. If they can see your fishing line, then you got a problem. Well, a lot of fishing lines are low vis, but the very best stuff that you're going to get, and again, I'm not going by any particular brand, I'm just going to show you one, is a fishing line that's like this, fluorocarbon. Now what this is it just about completely disappears in the water, where it's almost 100% invisible when it gets in the water. And it's great for finicky fish or fish that spook easy. And a lot of times you get in areas where bigger fish are kind of hanging out by themselves on isolated cover. They're watching for something to eat, but they're real. They've done dealt with a few folks trying to catch them, and then they're starting to get leery a little bit. So you take the line like this and fish it either as your main line or as a tag line on the end of a leader. And what the fish is going to be seeing is just the lure that you're using, whether it's live bait or artificial. They're not going to get to see your fishing line. Now, another great thing about these fluorocarbon lines, they're small diameter, okay, kind of like a braided line, but they have better abrasion resistance than standard braided lines. That we'll get to that in a minute. But they're really good lines, and there's a lot of different brands out there, fluorocarbon. Now, fluorocarbon, for the most part, is a little bit higher. This actual company here that's getting out on the market now, they're selling some lines through Walmart and a few other places that are priced pretty good, and they're really good. I like the 6-pound test when I'm fishing for crappie or bluegill. Cranky drag back. It's fun to play with them anyway. Get them on a little short rod, a little light action rod that puts a lot of bend in them, and you start dealing with them big shell crackers or them big old bullhead bluegills, and they're a blast to fish for and have them pull a little drag and stuff. It's great to take the kids. You'll have a ball. Now, my second line I wanted to bring up, and again, I'm not showing any particular brand. This is a Gliss braided line, okay? Now, this braided line, this stuff is super duper duper strong for size. Okay, this is 40-pound test line, and its diameter is only 10/1000ths of an inch. I mean, it's teeny tiny, and it's 40-pound test line. Compared to, even with the fluorocarbon, this fluorocarbon line, if you look at it, it's 8/1000ths of an inch, and it's only 6 pound. Okay, so it's only 6-pound test, but this 40-pound test is almost as small as that 6. And if you get it like around Dale Hollow, if you fish with green line a lot, it'll help you a bunch, because because of the water color and clarity, usually green line does better. Now, there's pros and cons in every kind of line. In the braided lines, I feel, just my personal opinion, they're less forgiving than any fishing line you can fish with. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're jig fishing, if you're worm fishing, if you're jerkbait fishing and you've got a finesse and you need to feel what's going on, you need to feel your lure, your jig, whatever, your worm popping over little rocks or stumps or coming through stuff, and you need to feel just that little tick. Sometimes for a smallmouth, they'll just tap it. or a walleye, all you just feel is the pickup. They don't really, go crazy after it like a striper or a big catfish might. So you need to feel that. Well, when you set that hook, this stuff don't stretch at all. It's instant. You feel everything, and the fish will too when you come back on it. And the good thing about that is if he's close to cover and you're fishing with this thin, heavy line, you set the hook on him, and when you do, through your first pullback, when you set the hook, you can move that fish a long way away from the structure that he's trying to lay in on. Because the reason that being important, if he gets in that structure, this stuff, the braided line, and don't let nobody fool you, there's not a whole lot of difference in any brand you get. It's not good when it's rubbing against something. It's going to cut. Even if it's just wood. I mean, just round wood like in a tree limb or something, we'll cut it. It's pretty easy to cut, especially if you're around a place where there's rocks or sunken boats or old blown up bridges or something like that you're fishing or whatever. But what I do is on this reel here, I've got braided line on it. But if I'm going, sometimes I'll catfish with one of these bass fishing reels. If I'm bumping, I like to do it. Or another reason that I like to do it is I'll use these kind of reels because I don't spool my big catfish reels with braided line. I just don't do it. I use these bass reels when I'm fishing with floats, when I'm going to fish live bait or cut bait for flatheads under floats, because this line will float, whereas the monofilament or the fluorocarbon will sink. So if I'm fishing off the back of the boat and I've got lines scattered out around the back of the boat and I'm going to fish with a float, I'm going to do my best to try to fish that float straight out behind the boat, way back past my other lines a little way, where my float is back past where my other lines are in the water, where my other baits are sitting on the bottom. And that way, if I get a fish on one of those other lines, I don't have to worry about it getting in this float line. Okay, this float line's floating on top and everything's going to be going on underneath him. That's the good thing about the braided lines. They'll float on top of the water, and a lot of times that's a big help. Now, also, you can use braided line catfishing. I'm not saying you can't. But if you're going to do it, you better use a mono leader of significant size. And what I use, a lot of people will say, man, that's the cheap old stuff you get at Walmart. Well, yep, it is. I use Zebco Omniflex, 50 pound. This stuff is like a plow line. It's really, really strong. Now it is big. Let me see, it's 29 thousandths of an inch. So it's more than almost triple the size of that 40 pound braided line. But the thing about it is, you can rub this stuff on a concrete block and it won't hardly break it. I mean, it's really, really, really good for any kind of abrasion resistance. Now, if you've got a situation where you've got fish that you're going to be dealing with that don't like to see the line, this isn't going to work too well. But in majority of the cases with catfish, they're on the bottom. They don't pay a lot of attention to the line. They lock in on that scent and movement or the blood trail, and they're just locked in on the bait. They don't really care about what's there because they're living on the bottom of the water and the lakes or the rivers, and that's what they're kind of used to doing, is dealing with debris and stuff and getting their food out of it. So your line really ain't gonna bother a catfish much. But now this stuff here is dirt cheap. I keep a couple, 3 rolls of this in my tackle box all the time. It's what I make up all my leaders. When I'm fixing up a line on a catfish reel, I'll put about 6 or 8 foot of this. Well, no, probably less than that, probably 5 to 6 foot length of it. I'll put it onto a barrel swivel on my main line and then come down and put my rig on this, whatever I'm going to be fishing with, whether it's going to be a float or it's going to be a Santigua Cooper rig with a small float, or if it's just going to be a Carolina rig, putting it on the bottom, whatever I'm going to be doing. But this will be the part that I want to come in contact with the fish, because even if you're fishing in an area that's just muddy bottom, that there's not any structure. Catfish, especially big catfish, certain times of the year, and especially blues, they will get some good sized teeth on them. Their teeth patch will grow, and that stuff will cut braided line just like that, and it's gone. And you lose, and here's the problem, or I guess this is the kicker to everything, that whenever something bad happens, it's always with one of the big fish. There's rarely ever something that just knocks you out of being able to get him in the boat if it's a little dink, you know. Excuse me, I'm kind of battling a little cold here. But whenever you get a big fish on, if there's a T you didn't cross or an I you didn't dot, he'll find it, because they got big. Same way with deer, they got big because they're not stupid, and they try to figure out ways to get off the hook. That's why blues will roll like a shark. They'll go crazy trying to get that hook out, and if they can get that line rubbing on that tooth patch, they'll cut you off if you're not using something that'll stand that abrasion, especially when it's getting close to time for them to go on a nest, and their teeth get a little bit longer and that tooth patch gets a little bit rougher. Then if you've ever had your thumb in a blue cat's mouth or your hand in a blue cat's mouth, you know what I'm talking about. They got some teeth in there, and they'll cut stuff. Now, main lines. If you're fishing for crappie, bluegill, you can also use, and even bass, you can also use just a standard monofilament line. I like Trilene. I like Big Game because it's pretty good line. It's tough. Now that it is a monofilament line, it will stretch, but it's not a huge diameter. This 8-pound test that I have here is 11 thousandths. So it's not much difference in diameter. It's about the same as a fluorocarbon, but this stuff is low vis also, because of, or the green is here for Dale Hollow. It works real well because of the watercolor, and it's tough line. It'll hold knots good. That's another important thing you need to know, is what knots to use with what line. Now, for main line for catfishing, I like Trilene Big Game in 25-pound test. All my reels that I catfish with are spooled with 25-pound as the main line, 25-pound Big Game Trilene. And I like the solar collector. This stuff will show up real well during the day and the night. If you've got a light on your boat, turn a green light on or a white light on the back of your boat, you can see these lines real well, and they show up real well when you're out in the day. You can see them real well, and a lot of times when you just need to see that something's messing with, so you understand what's going on with your line. Now, the good thing about Trilene is Trilene does have some stretch, but not as much as most. The Big Game don't have as much stretch as most monofilaments. And what that does, it gives you the ability to fight that fish for a longer period of time. Now, a lot of times you get monofilament and they get 4 or 5 real hard runs from a big fish on that, then you're quickly going to start losing power on your line, because it's got a constant pull and then a stretch and then another constant pull and then another stretch. And it's a lot of times can cause a cheaper line, or not say a cheaper, but a line that's maybe not built to withstand that kind of fishing might not hold up, and again, that cross T and dotted I may cost you a fish. But again, there's a lot of brands out there. Trilene's not the only one. There's a boatload of people that makes monofilament line that's good line. I can't say that I don't recommend anybody. I've used a lot of different fishing lines in my lifetime. I've probably used nearly every brand that's out there. I like a lot of them. You know, everybody, when we talk about braided line, everybody talks about spider wire. Spider wire is awesome line, man, but it's a little on the high side. There's some other lines you can get that are braided that are just as well, just as good, that will work just as well, that are a lot cheaper. But you know, you do your thing. You know, you do you. You fish with what you feel comfortable fishing with. Because again, it's all about crossing those T's and dotting those I's when you get that one chance. When you set that hook in that one big fish and you didn't do something right, he'll make you pay for it almost every single time. Now, like I said, the only thing that I stick to religiously about fishing with lines is I'll use monofilament entirely all the time as a leader when I'm catfishing. And most striper fishermen that I know do the same thing. They get some kind of heavy duty monofilament that they can use as a leader, because striper are really hard on lines too. And they do that so that you don't have an issue that you can't take back. It's kind of like pulling the trigger. Once that bullet goes down the barrel, it's going where it's going. Well, same thing on this line. Once you set that hook in that big fish, Everything that you've done worked down to that moment, and everything you didn't do is going to work down to that moment. Yeah, I've done bad stuff before and got lazy and didn't do what I should have done, but you know, that is what it is. Now I want to show you one other thing about these rigs and how monofilament's used. Now you can use monofilament in a rig like this. You can see this is, you've seen on a different video, this is my hot dog rig. It's a two hook rig, it's a Kentucky rig. But this whole rig here is made out of 70-pound monofilament. This is made to be put right on the bottom, drug around on top of rocks, and be able to resist abrading against stuff. And on this pole, because a lot of times I'll fish this rig straight down, or I'll fish it under a float, I have braided line. You can see the little fur on there. And this is, actually I think this is 50-pound Andy that I've got on this, is what's on this. But again, the reason that it's on there is because this line will float. So while I have my floating rig, my rig sitting under a float out behind the boat, the excess line is floated to the top, and it's not going to cause an issue if I hook a fish and it goes around in that area. Because a lot of times what I try to do is, if I know fish are working on a ledge but I don't know the depth that they're really going to hit in, I'll throw that float out, so I keep a suspended bait 7 or 8 feet under the surface, just in case. You know, I've been catching fish on the bottom and all of a sudden just hear that clicker go off and that bobber's took off somewhere with a big cat on it, or even a striper. It happens, you know, so a lot of times. But guys, fishing line is very, very important. Like I said, it's the number one or number two most important thing that you're going to use when it comes to your fishing, just depending on how what your school of thought is. But it's just a very, very, very important thing, and there's no magic bullet. There's no way to me look at you and say, go buy this fishing line made from this type of material at this weight, this pound test, and that's your perfect line. There isn't one, okay? But there is perfect lines for every fishing scenario. You just got to figure it out. Most of the time, if you do a little homework, do your research before you get on the water where you're going. If you know the depths you're going to be fishing in, you know the species you're going to be fishing for, you know the kind of bait you're going to be using, then you can look at that and look at what kind of line you want to fish, and you know to put the right reels in the boat and leave the ones you don't need today at home. Well, guys, I appreciate y'all watching. And if you like this video and you like these informative videos like this, let me know in the comments. That way I can keep coming with stuff like this and doing DIY things and kind of giving you a heads up on stuff that might help you, might not. It's just my opinion. That's the only thing I can do. But if you don't mind, just let me know. And you know what? I would really appreciate it if you guys would click that subscribe button. And if you do, click that bell so that whenever we put something else out, you'll get a notification so you can watch us on the next video. Y'all, this is the Fat Man. I'm the Fat Man, and I'm gone. Hey guys, if you liked the video, hit subscribe. Don't forget to click that bell so you get notifications the next time we put out a video. Appreciate you. It's the Fat Man. I'm gone.